I was like,
I don't really know what's happening, to be honest. I don't think they really care the order they did it, they just don't want to do anything to like see every single thing in the file.
so
I write on my test.
at that point, we're like,
It drove me crazy.
I went in.
Yeah.
When I went in to like give like the sympathy and sign essentially like that I was gonna be like paying my license with this brokerage. I like went in person to say, I was like, I just want to do it in person. Like I had a bad experience trying to get my initial forms done like through email. So I go up and the lady was like so freaked out that I gotta get this code. I was wearing a mask. I was standing 6 feet away from the door, like, and she was like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "I just needed to turn this in." She's like, "Why do they keep sending people here?"
like,
Like,
stand outside.
yeah, literally. I was like, yeah, like that is not. It was so funny. Like the door was like locked and bolted.
Yeah. No, I know. And every time I go there, like, I'm like, yeah.
I understand that, but.
I have like
So
6
then
cards.
my brain was literally so dead. But
You're like, it's
so
not
they
bad.
came and looked for my
I
I'm so
don't do that
upset.
like 30 minute drive.
Second time,
Yeah.
at a 65, and that was kind of
Road trip.
Exactly, exactly.
I didn't even see where you
So they
go back.
like,
I had to go to
give me a
the
list
test.
of
I have no idea how.
I know, all those in it. That's why I love it, like, that you get to drive around with like buyers. You go to. Yeah.
I just bought a car, and it's a little, like, cheap. Oh, like $5,000.
She runs, there's nothing wrong with that.
I just need something, like, I, not much money, so I can't think of
The only other option in Oklahoma City was the
It's not like, yeah.
and not make
Self-employed.
get everything, not get my test too much. So then she's like, I'm driving on Tuesday. And
It's not bad at all. I think I can get, I'll get 100,000 miles out of this.
That's good. Yeah, $5,000 for it.
Yeah.
You're still not right. Plus you're not putting it up. Doesn't help. I like got up at 7. I was like, I'm gonna get in the office at 8 today and just like start early, be on top of it. Took a shower and then I was like, nah, I'm getting back to that in a minute at 10. So that's what I did. So I'm at 7.
I've just been,
I really don't like being in meetings. It's like the whole office to myself.
I am about to go
I've
to
just
the
been doing like the all about
in my
Oh,
free time
yes,
because I need to do something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Starbucks level expensive, but I
I just did 60.
I usually.
And then $8.95 for.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, you know what? I'm used to New York. It's
We'll
fine.
get one. I just don't want to agree. You'll share.
Yeah, we're sharing. Yeah, I told him.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have fun, gang.
Thank you.
Hey, Kirsten, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
I just looked over and thought that was my computer.
This is
It's
like,
like the same background on
Yeah.
mine. Well, if we need to switch, we can. I need to like have everyone
That's
like.
what
I don't know, I guess
And there's.
I just work class started. I think that's 7 for 2 weeks. And so I was trying to remember this like, give you these. And
Seriously?
she's like, you want this one here? Yeah.
Huh.
It's
Interesting.
pretty good.
Yeah, we
Goodness, I
can
guess
do
I saved it a
that,
little
Yes, yes, that's included in
Yeah.
the.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like. I have to go up soon because I accidentally sent my contacts to my parents' house.
Totally
See,
But she said to permanent.
that's like what I have on all my paperwork. So it's kind of,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
So I did that, and she said after that.
No, I use my parents' contacts for everything because I'm like, I don't want to, especially with this stuff, since like you have to report within like 10 days if you change address and stuff, just use my parents.
I keep moving. So, and my addresses are all over the place. Like my bills go to Brownsville, Texas, to go to Saudi Arabia, and then my, we just moved this weekend again. So I have no proof of like my residency. So I'm trying to change
bouncing all around the world.
Like what I want to.
What brought your family to Saudi Arabia?
Well, actually, look at that. So,
Gotcha.
my dad's there, he's going to Kyrgyzstan.
Okay,
So, he'll be in Kyrgyzstan.
that's cool.
But he was a Mexican.
He just kind of goes where it's needed.
And then my mom's from New York. My dad's from here.
Interesting.
Yeah, my dad's from Denver.
Okay, that's what I love.
Family here on my dad's side, my mom's and she's not.
Did she move here just to like, just
She like wood shop.
And then
Okay, so you're not.
That's
right.
yeah, why not?
So she was like my junior year of college, so, you know, I was flying back to New York and then all of a sudden I was like,
Oh, we're going to Oklahoma.
so here I am,
It's
full circle.
Yeah,
40 minutes to
Weird
get there.
it's
circle, but
cool though.
yeah, it's
Fun to have those experiences. And New York, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
So that I can like self-discover and not go too far with my mom.
You
You know, now that I'm like far, I'm like,
Yeah.
I can experience like
Yeah.
stuff Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I wanna.
That is.
And you don't even know the amount of times I considered it. I'm like, I just need to get simple. Like, I just need to know how to farm, how to chicken. No, me either. So it's like, like, performing.
Yeah,
Like,
I know, graduating university this year felt like retiring.
I literally,
I was like, I just spent all that.
yeah, it's like, what? The world's changed.
Okay.
So I just, you know, in my smart.
I will just take that.
Just the days.
There you go.
I'm like all about, like, just like, I'm like,
That's exciting.
like without being a cult, I'd love to just like live on a compound with like people. Like, yeah, just like a little self-sufficient. I know. it's just gonna be it. Yeah. Yes.
Why did I get this random thing? Is that anything to do with me? I've never spoken to you.
It might just be a mass, like, I think it's just everyone in the Northern Port of Rivers got it.
Oh, because I joined on the board.
Yeah, yeah, so you'll just start seeing like emails nonstop.
Okay, I'm just making sure I wasn't like.
Hello.
So exciting.
Running a little hair behind. Okay, I did want to mention, am I on Zoom already? I don't know if I'm on Zoom or not.
So like class all over again?
Yeah, a little bit different. So, all right, post licensing will be October 5th through 9th here. So if you are interested in taking post licensing, George, I know we already talked, then get signed up for that. Okay.
What's the cutoff for that, registration?
I have to know at least the Friday before, just so I make sure I have enough materials.
Perfect, perfect.
Do you have any idea of when the next one will be?
It won't be this year. I have one at the Keller Williams Elite in Oklahoma City. So, but
Are
I
you
don't.
doing it? Is it in November?
Mhm.
I'll
So,
take that
November,
Okay.
yeah, if
one.
you want to.
know the days?
November, yes,
That
yes.
would help me out.
Let me grab my phone.
I want to take it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, the internet's, it's that.
I also have some, I can't remember. I can't remember because
It's 405, so KW, 405, 329, 697. Okay.
Okay.
6, there's a 6 after you soon.
697, oh, so 76. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. You know, I did that.
I was like,
mine
you have
too.
great eyesight. How in the world?
Yeah, I was like, okay, so we're at like 2020, 2015. With glasses.
These are prescriptions from.
6976, okay. Yeah, so
I would
it's
say- The Shanghai subway did a great job with these glasses. Like, I got these in a subway
No,
station.
you did not.
Really?
I
Like,
love that.
like it was just, he was like, sit down, I'll do your eyes. Like
You're like,
he made my prescription lenses.
That's cool.
and these say Tom Ford.
They say Tom Ford,
But
but are they?
oh, no. They were like,
I think Henry people leave.
It's like, I'll take the Tom Ford one. It's like Gucci or Tom Ford. I was like,
Okay, but the only gap.
You're so a lot. I wouldn't be able to get here.
Let's
Yeah,
see
I
now.
can't.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
I can-
And I didn't have any, I think maybe there's.
But I'm excited, so like.
No drivers and more.
I was like,
So I just did a connectivity.
Okay, that is going to be the first week of November, 2nd through the 6th.
Okay, perfect.
Does that work? No?
I'll make it work.
Oh, okay. Okay, so what do you guys think of Ignite class so far? Oh, I guess I should start with my introduction. I feel like I know everybody in here. So I'm Peggy Wright. I am the managing broker of the office. So if you ever need anything, my office is take a right outside and I'm the first office to the left. So as you're starting to not necessarily, Stephen is your kind of go-to person on writing contracts, but if you're like, am I going to get in trouble for doing that, then I'm your person. So I'm going to go ahead and write my email address and phone number up here. So this is my email address, pwright@kw.com. I will tell you though, if you need an immediate response, please text me. My cell number is 405-625-9631. This is my preferred contact because I check my email, but probably in the mornings way before anybody is awake, and then at various times throughout the day. So texting is the quickest way to get in touch with me. All right, so far, Ignite class, what do you guys think?
It's been great.
Yeah.
It's a lot of new stuff every time.
It is a
But also
lot of
very
news.
important, you know, just the same kind of key elements.
Basics. You're kind of going to see a similar theme running through the whole thing, so that you just can't, you know, plan. You have to actually be doing, because that's how your business is going to take off. So are you still doing, how are your contacts coming along? Slowly.
Good. I'm making my wedding guest list right now, so it's helping me do both.
Yeah, that's perfect. So kind of some, you know, go through your memory joggers. I have not seen the new Ignite material except for the part that I'm going over. So, but still going through your memory joggers of who you know, because when I moved to Norman, I had never lived in Norman before. So I moved back to Norman in July of 2006, and I started teaching, which is what was my profession before real estate, in August. So I knew a few people that I worked with in my building, but I wouldn't say I knew them well, you know, in any way, shape, or form, outside of just training and being in the same building. And I got my real estate license at the same time. So I literally knew 3 people in Norman. That was my database. So when they said, put your database together, it took me about 5 minutes. I'm like, and done. With my 3 people in here.
Sorry, Alex said that she's in the waiting room. That's what she can get into Zoom.
Wonder how you do that. Ah, oh, this would be important. Admit them all.
No, that's good to hear though, because I'm like, everyone I know is either moved away because they were in college or they're
Yeah,
like 21, 22, and then like not
that is very nice.
first time buyers.
Right. Okay, people that were in the waiting room, I apologize. Tiffany normally does everything for me. So you lose your right arm and there's problems. But yes, so what I was saying before. Okay, let me figure out how to mute you.
I'm here, I can hear you. Now I can't hear you, you muted yourself.
Muted myself. Where's Tiffany? Okay, hold on. I don't know how to do.
They have to unmute others.
Okay. I
Not
put that
this one.
mute.
Not
That's
that
muting
one.
me.
Select.
I just turned the volume down all the way, honestly.
Maybe I don't, but I thought it was right here.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, let me go over here more. Well, okay, we'll just do that.
Okay.
I'm just gonna turn the volume down, Neil. So you better turn your picture on and wave. So, okay, so as I was mentioning before, sorry you guys just coming in on the Zoom meeting, building your contacts, you know, as I mentioned, I had moved back from Texas in July, started my new teaching job in August, so that was really my database, people I barely knew. So not well enough to feel like I could go up and go, oh, I got my real estate license and feel like I could conversate with them, although I ended up putting them in my database anyway. So I knew 3 people. So my question for myself was, they kept saying, you got to build your database, you got to build your database. So after I put my 3 people in, spent 15 minutes on that, I figured there's got to be some activities. So when I started on real estate, my goal every day was to get up and say, how am I going to put myself in front of somebody who either needs to buy a house or sell a house? And that became kind of the ongoing challenge. So you hear this lead generation. You need to be lead generating. I had no idea what lead generating means. So at that time, because I thought, okay, I have a cell phone and nobody's calling it. So how have you guys, what are some things that you have started doing that's getting you in front of the path of somebody who needs to buy and sell in real estate?
Social media.
Okay. So when I got into real estate, there was not social media, which is weird now. Any other ways?
Calling FISBOs.
Calling for sale by owners? Okay. I was honestly a little bit intimidated on calling for sale by owners when I first got started.
That's scary.
There were so many times, and I know you guys are all going to feel the same way, where I picked up the phone. They should never have allowed me to conversate with people. I mean, I just look back at those early conversations and go, oh my gosh, that was so bad. So the thing about being so bad is you have to be so bad in order to get good. So if you're making those phone calls to for sale by owners, or you're making those phone calls to expireds, or circle prospecting, or door knocking, or however you're going to do it, you're going to eat a whole bunch of frogs before you get really good at things. So you can't, nobody rolls out of real estate school being an expert, a perfectionist on things. So your scripts will get better. So your responses will get better. Your follow-up will get better, because and the nice thing about taking this Ignite system is you're kind of learning what a follow-up system actually looks like. So, and that is going to be the key to your success, is following up with people, because you're going to look back in a year, find their name and number under some pile of paper and go, oh, and you're going to contact them and they'll go, oh, well, I bought a house. That is going to light a fire under you, because it just makes me furious at myself, you know, that I lost that lead and now somebody got a commission. It just wasn't me. Okay. So putting together that system and getting that into be a well-oiled machine is going to be the key to your success as a brand new real estate agent. So open houses. Anybody holding open houses? I know we're in kind of the COVID period. So, okay. For me, which is a little bit different period of time, you guys got to think back 14 years ago is a little bit different.
I'm supposed to be doing one here soon on Saturday. Sorry, I didn't get to unmute it fast enough.
Okay, so you
Can you
have
hear me?
bizarre. I do, they won't turn it down. Okay, so open houses are a great way to be building your database. Although I know COVID, that's kind of doing, a few little hurdles that you probably didn't have before. But it is a great place. I'm going to mute you guys on this end. So if you want to talk, wait, because that is, hopefully that works. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about negotiations so far. Let me go through this PowerPoint if it will move.
Hey, Peggy, I have a question.
Yes.
Whenever
So would you consider an offer the start of a negotiation?
Yes.
Because I put in my first offer this weekend and I really did not know. I knew we were going into a multiple offer situation, but I did not know how to like handle it in the best negotiating way.
Okay.
So yeah, I hope that that's something you're covering today. That would be great.
And here's kind of the thing about negotiations. So you're not going to be an expert taking this one class. It's going to take, you know, from your first offer to your 50th offer, you know, and all the contracts that are in between. So if you look on the second page of your booklet, so what we're going to be focused on today in growing your business, you know, you're already lead generating for buyers and sellers. So, but it's not enough to lead generate for them, because once you get them, what are you going to do with them? So, and that's probably where people fall down the most is I got the appointment and now they get the appointment and the appointment wants you to be there at 1 o'clock and you go, oh, I need a listing presentation. Okay, it's too late once you have to be there in 45 minutes to practice a listing presentation. So you really, has everybody started putting together what you feel like a listing presentation should look like in the beginning? No, you're like, no, I'm so busy calling people and adding.
Did my test on Friday, so, and this is my second class, so.
Oh, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to already have this done. Your listing presentations are not going to be perfect. In fact, like I said, I'm 14 years into this, and the other day I did a listing presentation. I thought, I don't really like the way that sounds anymore. I am constantly tweaking the way that I want it to flow. So there are some great online tools for you to put together a listing presentation. You can shadow someone on a listing presentation, but ultimately it doesn't matter if you have every bell whistle. You may pay $1,000 a month for all of this fancy marketing, but really the biggest part of a listing presentation is, one, do you connect with the seller? So, and do they like you? If you connect with them and they like you, you can have the fanciest listing presentation, or you can have it all on paper. It won't make any difference. So think about, you know, your connection part, which is a little bit about where negotiating a contract actually goes. Why are you not changing screens? There we go. So this is where we're at. So you guys have talked about seller listings, buyer houses. Now we're negotiating contracts. The thing that I feel like most people lose touch with when we start talking about negotiating contracts is that you feel like you're in this, you know, dog eat dog business and that you have to win. That's not what a negotiation is. If you think about hostage negotiations, give, take, any type of contract negotiations, and sometimes you're going to feel like you're in hostage negotiations with these contracts. So, but it's not all about, did your client get 100% of everything that they wanted? It's, were they willing to give up a little bit of this to get a little bit of that? And at the end of the day, can they live with the outcome of that? That's what negotiations are actually about. Okay, so if we look at, you know, where we're negotiating on contracts, I'm going to turn that phone off. I'm being everywhere. I'm trying to stay on track. They've got all new materials, so make sure I'm covering what you need me to say. When we talk about the breakdown in negotiations, so let's talk a little bit about why do people want you, because you're always going to have that when you go on a selling presentation. They got to ask. They got to feel like, you know, if I don't ask, I'm leaving money on the table. So when we're covering contract negotiations, if somebody immediately offered to come down on their commission, what would you think about that real estate agent?
Lose money on my house.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I might not be confident in their money.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, they can't sell themselves, or they gotta sell the property.
Right.
you need to value yourself.
Now shifting, and you are thinking a little bit about your position as a real estate agent to a seller, they are not having these thoughts in their head. They're just actually not. So their idea is that I need to talk this real estate agent in to coming down on their commission, because if I can talk this real estate agent into coming down on their commission, it's just going to save me money. Do you think that a seller sits up at night going, wow, I just out negotiated the person I hired for my house? They're really not having that conversation. So what is your job as a real estate agent to point out to them? All the things that they're not seeing. So because they don't see that if I ask you to come down on your commission and you say, yeah, sure, there's only a couple of reasons why you would agree to come down on your commission. One, you don't believe in yourself. Okay, you don't really believe in what you're doing, so you don't see the value in what you're doing. And then two, you feel like they're going to give that to someone else. Now, if I've got a pretty strong, opinion about the fact that I can get your property done, they're not going to negotiate that. So your job is actually going to be to point out to the seller these flaws and give them some thinking points on this, thinking points on asking someone to come down on their commission. Why would that not be in their best position? It's to their advantage.
It would almost be, you'd almost be able to say, you know, so will you drop your commission? So yeah, sure. What percentage would you like me to drop? 25%. Okay, great. So when I get a listing on your house, are you giving me permission to drop the price 25%?
Yeah, that is absolutely something that you can say.
You know,
That is definitely something you can say.
without sounding like it. Sure.
Yeah. So negotiating with the seller on your commission is still negotiating. We think all the time of contracts, but you can't even get to a contract if you're still talking about what your commission is going to be. So negotiating is just the start of a bargaining process. That's all it is, between two people. And then in this case, it's going to be between you and the seller. So now, in the beginning, they're going to make, you think of the contract phase, the putting things into contract. They call it your book is calling it the offer phase and the option period. So that's going to be the offer phase. Would you be willing to come down on your commission? So now you've got to have a conversation about that. A couple of scripts, and if they have bold coming up in, and I believe it's coming up next month, this would be a bold script. First of all, you have to isolate the objection. Why is that important to you? Tell me what about that is important to you. So, well, I just want to, sometimes they'll go, I don't know, my mom told me to ask. So sometimes they just go, I don't know, somebody told me to ask, and I don't really care. So if they answer like that, if they say, oh, well, somebody just told me that I always have to ask that, is that really an objection that they're having? No. Say, well, I understand that your mom told you that you should try to bargain that. Just tell her I said no. So, and then you're just going to move into the rest. They're going to be completely okay with that. You have to make a judgment call. Is this really an objection, or are they just, asking questions? Because there's two different things to that. So if you isolate that, tell me what is important to you about that. I want to save in commission. Okay. So when you hear somebody, I want to save in commission, what are they really saying?
I want to make more money.
I want to make more money at the end. So when somebody says to you, the biggest part of negotiating is not only listening to what people say, but really hearing what they say. So if they say, I want to save commission, I want to save money that I'm paying out in commission. I understand that. So what I hear you saying is that you want to net the most money. So let me tell you how I'm going to make that happen for you. So you've asked me if I will come down on my real estate commission, and the real estate commission is how I earn money for my livelihood. So if you could ask me to come down on commission and I immediately agree to that, what type of negotiator do you feel like I would be? And they're going to answer. Always give them an opportunity to answer. So that's what I'm dealing with, my money. So if I immediately came down on my commission or agreed to cut my commission, how do you think I'm going to handle yours? You have to let things sit sometimes, which is really hard in real estate because we always want to be talking. So sometimes you have to just put it out there, let it rest just a little bit.
Hey, Peggy.
Yes.
When is it okay to come down on your commission? Let me give you an example. I have a referral from Stillwater, and I'm listing the home, and she told her grandmother that I would do 5% on the commission, and I did not know this. And so we had to go over it, and like I was going over the listing agreement, and I went over the 6%, and she was like, "Oh no, we're doing 5%."
The grandmother said this.
No, the granddaughter was there and said, "No, I told moms as we would do the 5%." How would you handle that?
I probably wouldn't have let the granddaughter go on a listing appointment with me, but that's different. It's already happened. That's a little bit hard. I don't allow other real estate agents to negotiate on my behalf because I charge a certain amount, especially when I'm going to be paying out a referral fee. So because you're already giving away a portion of your income up front with referrals, and I love referrals, so don't get me wrong, because we do probably 10 to 15 of them a year. They're absolute gold, but that would be really difficult. That it's hard to go back and redo that, Alex, now because it's already happened. So you just have to decide at this point whether you want to work for that or not. So, you know, you could have handled it very, oh, I'm sorry, you must have misunderstood. My rate is 6%. Something to that effect.
Okay, so we're gonna do it. It's gonna be a transaction under my belt, and so that's why I'm willing to take that leap. But I did let her know, like, there's gonna be certain services that she's gonna have to work with me because of there only being a 2% on my end.
You may also, you may have, and I don't think, I would have never said this in front of my client, but this may be something, since you negotiated at 5% ahead of time, you may negotiate a smaller referral fee.
Oh.
So, I mean, I would, if I'm going to take a 1% hit, I don't want to pay out a large referral fee, especially if they've already kind of, tied my hands there. But we can probably talk about that. We can talk about that later.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, okay. Now, as we get into this, when you're making an offer though, so you're going to be negotiating your transaction. So you've got to talk about the offer phase. That's going to be the goal of getting your transaction. So if they're asking you to come down, I do that every time, then you need to have an idea. So how can you negotiate the deal? You know, things to consider when you're talking about this. How can your ability to negotiate affect the outcome of the deal? What are some ways that you negotiate things every day? How many of you have kids? Okay. Are you not negotiating all the time with them? Okay. You're negotiating with them all the time. You do this and I'll give you this. So if you don't do this, you don't get this. So that becomes, it can't be, oh, I said do this and they just follow like little soldiers. I wish it worked like that, but it doesn't. So, but what are some other things in like your everyday life that you feel like you are negotiating with? How many of you have ever had to call DirecTV or your cell phone bill because you're like, I am not paying that anymore. So I want the service. I'm not willing to pay for the service. Now, how does it usually end with that?
They usually come down on the price.
Okay,
Or they have.
and in turn, if they cut their price, now, do they do, oh, Sonia, because you said you were going to cancel, I promise that for the rest of your life, you will get your DirecTV at this price. What does it normally look like?
They'll come down a little bit, and then you're like, no, that's still a little bit too high. Well, we'll come down to this. So.
Okay.
And it's usually significant.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, why was I being charged so much in the first place?
It's you thinking about things.
You're often a trade, and then they'll lock you in for longer if they're gonna cut you down like that.
Or
Right.
they'll have more service benefits.
Right.
If you keep it at a higher.
They'll say, well, we'll throw in this. If you're willing to continue your payment for this, we'll add a little extra. If you don't want that, we'll lower your payment, and it will not be for life. We will do a lower payment of $50 less for 12 months. And at 12 months, then we can renegotiate. So do you see where that kind of that give and the take of this? Not one person gets everything. You didn't get a lower price in all the same channels.
Right.
So you either got a lower price and, for a shorter period of time, or you paid the same and got an increase in channels. So there are going to be, so use what you're already doing on a day-to-day basis and move it over to real estate. So how are you going to negotiate for your clients? Now, what do you think the best skills are? If you're going to negotiate, if you're going to possess great negotiation skills, what do you think are some characteristics or skills that you may have to have?
I think intuition to a degree.
A little bit, yeah, some intuition, like how is this going to go? What'd you say? You've got to have some scripts. So you've got to be practicing, definitely having some scripts. Now, your number one skill that you need to have is the ability to listen to your client and use your intuition to pick out what's important to me. Because you may have them say in the negotiations, well, it's super important to me that a home seller pay a home warranty for me. Okay, get down, isolate the objection with that. Okay, so tell me what is most important to you about a home warranty. Now, you're not even talking to the seller yet. The biggest mistake that I see people make is they pick up the phone and the buyer says, I got to have a home warranty. And they go, okay. So you pick up the phone and you call the selling agent. You go, they have to have a home warranty or it's not going to work. Okay, slow your roll on that and start having conversations with them. Tell me what is most important to you about a home warranty. So Jayla, we'll kind of role play this out. So Jayla, you have said that you do not want to go through with this contract unless the seller provides a home warranty for you. Tell me a little bit why, tell me about why that home warranty is so important to you.
Well, growing up, my parents rented out a house and we just had water issues all the time. And so flooding and burst pipes and all of that, and I don't want to deal with that.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that you're concerned about things that may go wrong with the house.
Yeah.
So if we had an excellent home inspector and we had all of those components checked and they were in working order, you know, a home warranty will cover it for the first year. But if you have it checked now and they're in excellent condition, would it be more important to you to have that home warranty in place or have the ability to pay for someone to come out later if you needed them for some reason?
If I knew that everything was in working order when you bought it, I would be more okay with having somebody come out later.
Okay, because a home warranty is typically going to cost you $75 for a trip fee each time. And if the home is in, if the components of the house are in pretty good order, it may be not as expensive to repair those items later when you're already going to pay a $75 trip fee. So if we can get the seller to come down a little bit in price, or you know, you have 5 other things on your repair list. If they agreed to fix all 5 of these things, would not having a home warranty be okay?
Yeah, I think so. If they're willing to fix all the other things I was asking for.
Okay, so that's going to be something I'm going to go back and talk to the seller about. So, okay, you know, she really wanted that home warranty for peace of mind, but I think if we have all of these things fixed by a licensed plumber, a professional HVAC, everything else, that's more important. She just didn't want to break while she's there. So we need somebody that services that to be more, you know, to be more on top of things with that. So it can make a difference if you get down to why they want things. Let's, you know, some other things that you might have in question with contracts. Well, I may be getting ahead of myself, so let's just move through this. Okay, so when we talk, the next part is going to be brainstorming negotiation issues. What are some things that might, I feel like really bad because you guys are on Zoom and I'm terrible at these Zoom meetings, but I'll say it out loud. So what are some things in a contract that you know could come up when people are writing contracts? I want, because in a buyer's mind, when I'm writing the contract, I want. They're not saying, I wonder how the seller feels about that. So what are some things that that may be issues for a seller that a buyer may want?
Closing costs.
Okay, always closing cost. Okay, what else?
Closing time.
Closing times, closing dates. I either want a really fast closing or I want it to be an extended closing. So let's talk about that. If I need closing costs, so essentially to a seller, is it more important to them the terms of a contract or what they're going to net at the end?
Sure.
So about 100% of the time, it's what they net. So, so rarely ever do you have people, you know, if they have a great listing agent and you're offering a price, they're just doing a net sheet. What I walk away with is way more important to me than the terms of the contract, such as paying closing costs or paying a home warranty. If it makes sense for me to do that financially, I can do all of those things as a seller. So when you're talking about closing cost with a buyer, do buyers watch a little bit too much HGTV?
Yes.
Yeah, so they think in Oklahoma that you're gonna walk into a house, offer $50,000 below asking price, and they want a home warranty, and they want $10,000 worth of closing, and they want it all. So is that reality? Yeah, at the end of the day, that's not a win for the seller. So if you want to be a great negotiator, it's best for you to set expectations up front. You can head off a lot of negotiation problems by simply setting the expectation up front with a buyer. So if I have a buyer and I'm doing my consultation, because you guys talked about consultation with them, if I say, okay, this is what the market looks like, and they're going to offer in, let's say in Norman. Does anybody kind of have a ballpark idea what the list to sell price in Norman? That means what did it list for? What did it sell for? What is the difference between those two numbers?
Right now,
Mhm.
Pretty close.
I bet in price point, 150 to 250, it's above.
Right. So sometimes it's over 100%. So when you start looking at those and you go, how can it be 102%? That's because they're competing offers and they're coming over asking price. So, but on the average, in even the last 7 to 8 years, it's been 97 to 98% list to sell price. So if I have a $300,000 house, making an offer that's $50,000 under is really not realistic. And if I don't tell my buyers that, will they know that? No. Okay, because they watch HGTV and they think that's the way it's supposed to be done. So if you set the expectation with them up front, okay, just so you kind of know what market we're in all of Norman, it's a 97%. You can go on the low end, although it's closer to 98, 97% list to sell price. What does that mean? If you're offering, if it's a $100,000 listing, you can realistically expect them to come down to 97,000. So you're going to notice that a lot of times, and I use the term HGTV, they're probably going to come get me someday, but I use them all the time. When you're watching HGTV shows, you see people bid $10,000 or $15,000 under the list price. You're going to see by these numbers, and you need to always have the data with you. That's not realistic for the market that we're in. And I don't want to show you, here's the benefit, I don't want to show you a lot of houses and get your hopes up that you're going to purchase that house only for the seller to refuse your offer. So you've got to get to the pain point with these buyers. So what is, when I say pain point of the buyer, pain point for a buyer is going to be different with every buyer. Some of them need to be in a house by a certain period of time. So if we have to continue to look at houses, we may not be able to close on that property and get you out of your apartment by the end of November, okay? So it really always needs to, it's not me. You know, if your conversation starts with, if you don't close this and I don't earn a commission by November, they do not hear you at that point. It cannot be about you. So really it's where do they want to go? Having a consultation with your buyer or your seller and kind of finding out what would be their pain points will help you in negotiations later. So whether they need to move by a certain day, what about, you know, if we talked about closing cost. So I need $3,000 worth of closing cost, or I need $6,000 worth of closing cost. So if I don't get the seller to pay $6,000 worth of my closing costs, I will not be able to purchase that house. What could make that a win on the seller side?
You don't ask them to drop the price $6,000.
Yeah. So for a seller, setting that expectation up front, and I tell my buyers this, I go, every time you put a condition in your contract, it's a hurdle. And when the sellers have to jump over too many hurdles, they get tired. And when they get tired, they don't want to negotiate with you anymore. So the more hurdles that you can move out of the way, the more the path is going to be a little bit clearer for a seller to be able to accept your offer going in. So what are some hurdles that we run into outside of closing cost?
Maybe they want to sell as is and you're asking for a whole bunch of repairs.
Okay, lots of repairs, closing cost, home warranties, delayed closing dates. You want them to leave, contingencies are a big one right now. You want them to leave a lot of things, okay? So I will buy your house, leave your hot tub, your this, a lot of personal things. I want your televisions. We had one contract where they actually asked for their cat. I'm not even kidding.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did. They fell in love with this cat when they were looking at the house. I don't like cats. They could have had mine. You know, I'd be like, yeah, it comes with it.
Put it
So,
in the contract.
yep, they put gray
That's
cat.
crazy.
So, but I've had people put in furniture. So when you're talking to your buyers, just explain that to them. Everything you ask for is a hurdle. And the more hurdles that you put in the way, the sellers are going to get tired. So, and once they get tired, they negotiate with you.
Do you just have conversations with them, like right now, I mean, it's a real short conversation. We have very little negotiating power. The
Yes.
house will be gone in 3 days,
Yes.
right? I mean, are you that frank? with
When
them?
I will always have a buyer consultation with my buyers. And when we go through all the things that you have in a buyer consultation, how are you paying for this? Well, build rapport. I think some people skip the rapport part. They have to like you. They have to trust you. So do you like and trust somebody that you feel like that they don't know what they're talking about? You might like them, but you will not trust them. So during your consultation with the buyer, here's your opportunity to educate them on what the market's doing. So if I'm sitting down with the buyer, I'm like, well, we can look at some houses and you just make a decision and we'll just kind of see if the buyer, the seller takes it or not. And you're just like, meh. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, this person does not have a clue what they're doing. You're going to make them nervous. So, which all of you are like, this is my first week in real estate. So confidence can be learned by studying the market. Okay. So as long as you know what the data says, numbers don't lie. So when I'm sitting down with their consultation and they say, like Tom, you talked about, you got to have a conversation with them about what they're going to bid on. So we have one particular buyer that's looking in around 140,000. Okay, so this is where we've talked about financing 140,000. Let me tell you a little bit about the market at 140,000. So you need to have some information. Houses in that price range typically stay on the market in Moore, Norman, all around 7 days or less. So, and most of them are going to be going into multiple offers. So every time that we make an offer on a property and you love it, we need to make sure that we put our best foot forward, because we don't have the ability to go back and forth. We have 5 or 6 other people at any given time that's going to be asking for the same thing. So that's when you're going to talk about hurdles with the buyer. So you have indicated you must have $6,000 worth of closing. If I'm going to make that appealing to a buyer, what do you think needs to happen with that? This is a conversation. This is not just a lecture of you talking to a buyer. So let's say that Sonia, I ask you that. You need $6,000 worth of closing. We know that this is a very competitive market. The data shows us that houses are on the market for less than 7 days, and you're probably going to be competing with 6 or 7 people. What do you feel like may need to happen in order for you to win this house?
I would probably be motivated
To come down on how much you need in closing cost? Okay, so let's talk about that. Do you need $6,000 in closing cost? I know you have your down payment. Do you have another resource that you can go to that could assist you with your closing cost? Can you take a loan out against your 401, or do you have grandparents who may be willing to loan you money? Or do you have money in savings that you really didn't want to tap into, but you may have to do that?
Sure.
Okay. So now we're gonna say yes. So my parents have said they may give me some money or something. If the answer to that is no, that's a hard objection. So at that point, I go, to make this more appealing to a seller, because we have to have those and we don't have another resource for those. There are going to be times when we're looking at homes and I feel like that after I've done the market analysis, we might be able to come down in price a little bit. But the fact that you need $6,000, there is going to be times in that price range, because it's so competitive, I'm going to do a market analysis and I may advise you to go over asking price.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I ask you, or if I tell you that it's in your best interest to go over asking price, it's because a seller needs to net a certain amount. And we're looking at how can we be appealing in the bottom number. So if you tell her that this may happen in your price range, Now, I'm going to do, did you hear where I said I'm going to do a market analysis? And if it's in your best interest, we may go over asking price. Do you think she trusts my opinion now?
Yes.
Yeah, because one, I'm not just pulling this out of a hat. I'm not just gonna go, wow, I think you ought to offer over. Okay, I'm gonna show her the data and say, I think due to the appraisal, you know, we've got a little bit of wiggle room here and we may be able to go over a little bit. That is gonna make her trust me and my negotiation skills. What was your question?
I was just gonna ask how powerful is like closing time and like negotiating for like that?
It can be very, it can definitely influence this. So because as a listing agent, I like to, you know, not only the close date, it really depends on what the seller needs. So sometimes that date can be a little bit flexible. If they have small kids, it's a family, or it's close to the end of a school year and you know that they probably want to finish out a school year, you could be a little bit flexible with your date if possible to say, you know, we can close after the school year.
Right,
ends.
or like you need $6,000,
But we can give you extended time on that. I've had lots of, don't always assume that sellers always take the highest number because that is not true. They will look at the terms of a contract first. And if it's more favorable for them to accept an offer based on an extended close time, or you don't have a house to sell. So those are always going to be objections. So telling them they can go over is an option.
Whoever has the needs loses, right? Whoever has the needs, I need to get in early.
I need closing costs. I need an early close date. I need a home warranty. All of those are going to be your hurdles. Sure, sure,
You can always call the listing agent too, to see, hey, what's important to your client
sure.
as the buyer's agent.
Yeah, before you write the offer, would they prefer to have an extended close date or would they prefer to close in 30 days if you have that possible? Now, let's look at this. You know, the next hurdle, getting the house under contract, which you guys are going to be like, what? Is not your biggest problem, okay? Why do people hire real estate agents? Why do they hire real estate agents? They can purchase property on their own.
I think to have somebody who's there kind of championing them, you know, making sure that they're getting the best, you know.
You need a third-party, non-emotionally invested person. Now, hear me say this, new people. So you need to be a third-party, non-emotional person. I have seen so many people hang up and they go, that real estate agent. And I go, do not pick up the phone and call anybody until you are calmed down. So if the sky is falling for you, they're like, oh my gosh, they're the experts. The sky's falling for them. This is really bad. It's not really bad. Okay. So make sure that when you're talking to people, you're doing that in a very level-headed space, because how you feel will transfer to your buyers. I've seen more real estate agents bust their own transactions. It's crazy because you guys will show them 15 or 20 houses. And then during the course of negotiations, you're like, oh, I would not buy that house, but that repair, not happening. So, and then they're like, oh, well, she said not to buy it, so we shouldn't. And then you bust the contract and you're out showing them 25 more houses. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for a solution to the problem. So I always like to have two solutions if an objection comes up. Okay, we can do this or we can do this. Which do you prefer? So that way they feel like they're engaged in that decision-making process. But you know, we can either ask grandma for $3,000 of your closing, or we can go over asking price. Which do you prefer? So let them kind of be in the driver's seat on that. Okay, so now getting, as I was kind of going before I went off on that bunny trail, getting something under contract is not your biggest hurdle. Keeping it under contract is your biggest hurdle. So this is where your negotiation skills are really going to come into place, because things are going to happen during the transaction. When do they normally happen? Sometimes it happens with the appraisal, and you can, you know, really to me, when the appraisal comes up and comes up short, homework should have been done ahead of time before you let them make that offer. Most of the time it's during the repair phase of things. So because buyers get all caught up with, this house has all of these things wrong with it. How can you solve some of those problems up front and you won't need to negotiate with the seller?
We find that the most success, or getting success, we find with the seller repairs the most things, or we have the most success with getting the seller to approve these things when we limit our list between this number and this number of items.
Okay, so sometimes taking care of those items before they become negotiation factors is the best bet. If I know that the roof needs to be replaced, and you guys may not have that experience yet, but if you walk up and it doesn't look like the roof is laying flat, that's a problem. So if all the shingles are kind of like, you know, bedhead Sunday, that's going to be an issue. So you may even put it into your contract, things that you can see, things that are going to be an issue. Put it in your contract when you write the contract, because if the seller will agree to those things up front for a certain price, am I negotiating those items later? No, it's not becoming a problem. If I know that the roof needs to be replaced and I write in there, if the roof inspection comes back needing to be replaced, seller agrees to contact the insurance company and have the roof replaced. If they agree to that up front, they're like, okay, I would do that. They're not shocked when that comes up as a repair later because they've already agreed to it. So, and then there's just certain other issues. If you see that the house may have foundation problems, so, and you're, you know, if the house, you know, finds to have foundation problems, seller agrees to install piers up to a dollar amount, okay?
Do you
So-
have standards that you just do that with, and all houses are kind of the same? Do you have standards, if the roof after inspection appears, that goes in every contract?
If I look at the, you know, because sometimes looking at the roof, it looks bad, but it may just need that the nails need to be, you know, hammered back down or something. And the roof doesn't actually need replacing. So, but if I've negotiated that up front, then the seller's like, okay, I'm prepared for it. If it doesn't happen, it's just a windfall for me.
Right.
Yeah, so taking care of some of the things that you can see up front will help you in your negotiations later. But you also need to set the expectation with your buyer when it comes to doing repairs. Because if I hear people say, well, we're gonna get an inspection, we'll just ask for everything on the list.
Do not be that person.
Yeah, don't be that person. So because let's think about some of the repairs. When you hire a home inspector, their job is to find every small little thing all the way up to the very large things that should be concerning. So it could be as small as caulking around a bathtub or the backsplash in the kitchen. That's always a big thing, they want to caulk around. Does anybody know how much a tube of caulk cost?
$2,
Yeah. We're at a solid $3, and that's if you go with the expensive stuff. Does it take a rocket scientist to put caulking down? Nope. I can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So when we are talking about doing the inspections, I like to set the expectations with buyers before the home inspection is even done, because they need to know they're going to have a heart attack if you don't prep them ahead of time. Because the home inspector gives them a list and they're like, oh my gosh, this house is falling down. Is it really falling down? No, you know, well, most of the time it's not. So with that, if I tell them, okay, we're going to have a home inspection. The purpose of this home inspection is to find components of this house that we cannot see. So which are going to influence major money-making decisions later. The roof, the plumbing, the heat and air, the hot water tank, any foundation problems. Little things that will be on your home inspection list that will be a little honeydew list for you later, maybe caulking around bathtubs, filling dirt in, you know, that maybe pups have dug up in the backyard, replacing face plates that are on the electrical switch, because I wouldn't want you to lose your dream home over a $3 tube of caulk. So when you can put like a very cheap monetary value to something, and then that is the point where they go, that is stupid. It is stupid for me to ask for that when, you know, the air conditioner needs to be replaced. So that will keep you from having these long lists. Doing a long, if it's like size 4 font, because you have 25 things on it, do sellers even look at that when you first send it over? No, the only thing you did was they went, whoa, you know, I'm not doing all that. As a listing agent, I go, you're not doing what? And they go, all that. I go, well, what is it? I don't know, but I'm not doing all that. It's because it's too much. So you can help yourself hold your transactions together by helping your buyer be realistic about what they're putting on a repair list in the first place. Good.
In the contract, doesn't it say that those items should be items that are like not working, or it's not like, oh, light bulbs are out, and you're
Right. And then we go back to, well, how much, how much are light bulbs? Do you feel like that, for $5, if you got all the other repairs that you wanted, that you could probably buy some of those later? But you gotta be realistic, because sometimes they just get into this mindset, I want it all. And if they want the house to be brand new, if they say, well, I just want everything on this list. Well, it sounds like you want a brand new house. Should we cancel this contract and start looking at brand new property? And give them a reality check is what you're looking at. So here are some, when you're talking, we talked a little bit about price, if you're a buyer and you're negotiating price. So on the flip side of that, let's get into a seller position on this. So if you're selling your property, do they list their property for $200,000 if they don't feel like they can sell it for $200,000? No. So they realistically think that they can get $200,000. So if I were to get an offer for $195,000, your part of your negotiations is going to be to point out other favorable terms within this contract. Sometimes there aren't any. But sometimes there are. Most of the time there are favorable conditions. They're asking you to sell their house at $195,000, but fantastic news. They are not asking you to pay any of their closing costs. Okay, so if you can put your negotiations into a better light about the negatives, here's the negative, they ask for a lower price, but the positive is they didn't ask you to pay any of their closing costs. So, or you could, negotiate that out just a little bit. And that's going to kind of go along with the terms. They're giving you a full price offer. Negative is that they are asking for a 60-day close, or they've got a property to sell. So you need to be pointing out the positives and the negatives of both sides. That helps them not focus, because people tend to focus on the negatives of things. That's all they see. They get a little bit of tunnel vision with that. So point out the positives that go along with that. Okay. Move to the next section. Have they been giving breaks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you sure?
So you have permission to take a break on things. Oh, you're fine. Okay, so when we talk about the 3 points in a negotiation, common points, let me go to this 3 keys of negotiations. This is, turn to page 5. This is going to be participant guide, it's got more details about common points of negotiations, but the common points of negotiations either fall into 2 terms. It's either going to be price or terms. So if I can get them to, and like I said, when we talked about closing costs, if I can get them to pay all of my closing costs, but pay them a higher price, that may be a win-win situation for them. Or if I want them to come down in a price, just don't ask them to do as many other things with that. Your book actually talks about earnest money and option fees. We don't do a lot of option fees here. So, but if I'm on the selling side of things and somebody makes me an offer and it's a $200,000 house and they're putting up $3,000 worth of earnest money, could that be a negotiation term? Okay. Absolutely. So they're putting up quite a bit of earnest money. And if they were to default on this contract, because you're a little bit worried about they have a house to sell or they have this house to close on, you have the ability to keep their earnest money. So sometimes that's the point that sellers, they're like, well, at least I won't walk away with, with nothing on this. So, but most of the time it's going to be repairs. And like I said, if you can set your expectations with your buyers up front, that's going to help. Now, how could I do that on the seller side of things? I get a TRR. It's got more on it than probably, it's got caulking, it's got replace the face plates, things like that. Okay, so sometimes you can negotiate that out. Let's, instead of, you making these repairs, let's see if the buyer would be willing to exchange a cash value for this. Occasionally they're not. So, with sellers, sometimes they will immediately say no. They'll see 10 things on here and they're like, oh, I'm not doing all 10 of these things. So how could you sit down with the seller and kind of have a little bit of a meeting of the minds on the different repairs that they may be asking for?
I mean, I think, I don't know, I assume that first you need to understand what the objection actually is, like why don't they want to do these things?
Right. So is it because maybe they're like first-time home buyers and they don't know how to do any of these things? So sometimes people say no and they don't understand what the objection is. So I may look at a list of 10 things, and the first one was, you know, have the HVAC serviced. Okay, that's probably legit. So have, what's some things you guys have had come up on TRRs? Leak underneath sinks, things like that. So I like to sit down with my sellers and put a monetary value on all of these things. And you're going to get that a little bit with experience, but if you don't have it, call someone. Okay, so call someone with a little bit more experience. Say, you know, you've got a leak underneath the sink. If I have to call a plumber to do this, we might be looking at $50 because while they're here, they're going to fix that leaking spigot outside. Okay, we got a $75 trip charge and probably $150 worth of parts. So are you willing to cancel this contract for $150? So sometimes when you put that into perspective for a seller, they're like, oh, well, that's not very much. That's not very much to do. And then a few of the things that people put on there, would you be able to do some of these items yourself? So, because people will put things on a TRR that are simple things they can do themselves. If they happen to get the agent that puts the caulking on there, that's a pretty $3 and your time fix. Would you be willing to cancel this contract and be moving on October the 30th over a $3 tube of caulk in 15 minutes of your weekend? Yeah. So
You just wanted the gutters.
Kind of silly, but like not that difficult to do.
Right.
Sometimes like if that's all they're asking for, like, hey, would you be able to clean out the gutters and fix the leaky sink, and that's all they ask for, then is it unrealistic for the seller? Yeah, what you're saying, it's like,
right.
that's all,
So
they
worry
could
about
do it
things that you-
themselves, and that's all they're asking for.
But occasionally you will get that TRR list where they list lots of things. So where they want lots, you know, $4,000 or $5,000 worth of repairs. Now at that point, you know, is it more important, you know, if you were to cancel this contract, how is that going to impact your move? And if they say, well, we have to sell during this time, well, then we need to negotiate out these repairs. What number would you feel comfortable offering the buyer in lieu of these repairs, maybe paying an extra closing cost or potentially coming down on the price? They don't always assume that your sellers won't do things. And if they can't do the repairs, they may be willing to adjust in closing cost or purchase price in order to make it happen. If you are going to be negotiating the amount of closing cost, you need to be really aware of the capped amount that sellers can be paying on behalf of their buyers. Does anybody know the percentage on FHA? If you have an FHA financed house? Well, 3.5% down payment, but, and you may not, you're gonna all learn this in post-licensing if you don't know this yet.
I know all of these.
When your sellers can only contribute a certain dollar amount, depending on what type of financing that you're actually using towards buyer's repairs. So I'm gonna use the $100,000 house because that's a little bit easier to figure. If I'm using FHA, sellers can only contribute 6% towards your closing cost. So if it's a $100,000 house, and I'm already paying $6,000 of your closing cost, could I pay more towards your closing cost as not to do these repairs? No. My only option would be to reduce the price of the house. Would you be willing to sell the house for $2,000 less and not do any of these repairs? So $2,000 doesn't make a lot of difference to a lot of people. They're like, oh, not have to do all that, sure. You know, be willing to do that. So you're giving them options. So it's 6%. And like I said, we'll go over all of this in post-licensing. 6% if you're using FHA, but if you're using conventional financing, it goes down to 3%. So you want to make sure that you have the room. Now, if your seller's not paying any closing cost for your buyer, then you absolutely have some room to play. So, but if not, you may be doing an overall price reduction on the house. Okay. So when I'm talking with a seller about having to do a price reduction, all they hear is less money. So what could I do for a seller to show them how that's going to impact their proceeds?
Net sheet.
Yeah, do another net sheet for them. If we have to reduce the price of the house, because there are lots of things that adjust during that. they pay less commission, they pay less in dock stamps. So they may be willing to come down on the price a little bit because it's really not going to cost them $2,000. It'd be like $1,800 and something. Okay. So just giving them options during that. Okay, negotiation is a skill that can be learned and perfected with experience. The best practice for negotiating and bringing buyers and sellers is the 3P approach. So the very first thing in the approach of this is that, one, you need to be prepared. So you need to know not only what your goal is, but what their goal is. You have to know your client. So what is it more important that they move to a certain area, or is it more important that they net the most amount of money? I don't know the answer to that. You're going to know that by having your conversations with them when you list the property to the house. So when it talks about being informed, okay, I'm going to be better able to have a conversation with my sellers if I know how much these items are going to cost before I present the TRR. So if I get a TRR in the mail and it has 20, or in the email and it's got 20 things, and I automatically just send it over to the seller and say, take a look at this, they're going to freak out. Okay, they're going to freak out. So would it change the conversation at all if I did a little prep work in the beginning and told them we're probably going to get a list? There may be some things on it that are very minor, but there may be some things that are major. And then when I get the TRR, say there are 20 items on the list, I've already got ballpark estimates for you on the top 10. Is that going to make a seller feel better about using you? Yeah, and then the more information that they have, the less you won't have to say, get in out of the window. You know, there's no need for you to jump today. Just climb on back in. We've got this covered. We're going to get you moved. So if you can make them informed about what they're doing, they're going to feel better. Also with buyers, because buyers get those inspection lists and they're just like, oh my gosh, this is going to cost thousands of dollars to fix. Well, maybe not thousands. What would you say if it only cost $200 for that repair? Would that be a reason that you would cancel this contract? No. Well, that's what that repair cost. Okay. So if the house needs carpet, and you guys are going to see this when you're negotiating out with buyers, buyers are always going to go, oh, it's going to be expensive. It's going to be like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 with carpet. What kind of carpet are you putting in?
Cashmere carpets.
So because depending on the house, you know, you may want to have some idea about what carpet costs. Spend a little time at Lowe's this weekend and take a look at the, you know, cost of carpet. So if it's a 1,500 square foot house, you're not putting in 1,500 square feet of carpet because there are the tiled areas, you know, the areas, the kitchen. So
Would you say in general, would you do like half it, like do like a third of the square footage? Like if you're just trying to give a rough calculation?
usually about half.
Okay.
Half the house is
Okay.
what it's going to be, maybe a little bit. It depends on how much, like, you know, so many houses have wood floors now.
Right. That's
So
what I was
it's,
thinking, too.
yeah, you just got to kind of go in and say, okay, you're talking about 3 bedrooms, average, you know, price for the good carpet, you know, and use your calculator real quick. You're probably looking at $1,700 worth of carpet in these bedrooms. Then they're like, oh, because in their head, they always go with the higher number. So.
Buyers and sellers both do that, where they get turned off with the TRR because they think it's going to cost a lot more than it actually does. But sometimes if we know that, okay, they want these things fixed, we'll have our handyman go out there and be like, okay, this is an estimate for what it's going to cost. And
Right.
then submit that with their TRRs.
And they just feel better. They're like, okay, that's not as bad as I thought. It's kind of like going to the doctor and then you go, oh, that's not as bad as I thought. So I'm actually going to live. I'm going to see 48 after all.
Who does the TRR go to first? That's a little off topic. I was just curious.
No,
Is that-
TRRs, the buyer's agent's going to write it and send it over to the seller or to, excuse me, the buying agent's going to write it, send it to their buyer and say, are these the items that you want? And they're going to say yes, and they're going to sign it. And then the buying agent's going to send it to the listing agent.
And that's based off of the appraisal and things that come out. from the
Nope, appraisal hasn't
Okay,
even
that's
been done
separate.
yet. Yep.
Oh, that's
Two
before
separate
the
things.
appraisal.
That's just looking at the house.
That's just looking at the house. And I think you really need to explain that well to your buyers, that the appraisal and a home inspection are 2 separate things.
Mhm.
Because people are like, oh, well, a home inspection, you know, the appraiser's going to check that thing. The appraiser is not going to check it. The appraiser only walks into that house to take pictures for the lender. He may or may not turn on the hot water and see if it turns hot. Other than that, his job is to get a visual idea of what the house looks like, and then he walks out. They don't check components. So it's important that you have the components checked. But because that process goes from the buying agent to the listing agent has time to prepare their client. So, or when you get that buying, like when we have home inspections, it usually takes that day. You know, I give buyers a day to kind of look over the list, and I say, okay, so I want you to take a look at this list, and we're going to prioritize. If you have to have what is the most important all the way down to the least important thing that we may ask the seller to fix. I also have a copy of that report. So in the meantime, we're going to get back together tomorrow, and we're going to talk about what needs to be fixed. So I'm on the phone that day, you know, calling my handyman. Hey, I've got a leak underneath the sink. If you had to go over and fix it, it's in more. What would you charge me? So because if I can tell buyers a dollar amount on things, then what they thought was their number one, you know, may not be their number one. They're like, oh, a $20 fix. People think GFCI outlets. And I go, okay, if you bought the most expensive one at Lowe's, it'd be $25. And then you might pay an electrician $50 to put it in. So, but you've got a roof that needs to be repaired. Do you want the GFI to be number one? Or do you want, you know, the $8,000 roof replaced? Those are going to be two separate things. So when you're in the preparing, ask questions, and as it mentions in here, and I get a little off topic, so I apologize. Ask some open-ended questions. What additional information do you feel like you need to know about whatever the issue is before you make an idea? Is it important? What is important about closing in 30 days? Or how do you feel about that? If a structural engineer comes back and says, hey, it looks like it needs 5 piers, and they're freaking out, what worries you most about the piers? Well, I don't know if I'm gonna need to do this again in the future. How much is this gonna cost me? How about I find out what the cost of that's gonna be and what their warranty process is, and we get back together. So that's gonna help you with your negotiations by being able to overcome what they're worried about. Now, on the other side of this, on the closed questions that expect a different response will often have yes, no, or one word. Do you have to sell your home by a specific date? So, you know, this is when I'm meeting with my buyers for the very first time, or my sellers for the first time. Do you have any other offers? What if you called the listing agent and they had other offers? Does that reframe the conversation that you're going to be having with your buyers? Unfortunately, in this day and time, yes. So, okay. So I called the listing agent and she said that she has 3 other offers. Do you remember when we met during our consultation and I said, I may advise you at some point that you will want to go over asking price? They're going to say yes. And you're going, this is one of those times. So based on the information that you have. Before you allow, and I do want to do a broker disclaimer on that, before you allow a buyer to go over asking price by any significant amount, run a market analysis and make sure that the house will appraise. It's not going to do you, the buyer, or the seller any good to get a property under contract and then find out in 3 weeks that it will not appraise for that, because now you're back at square one. Seller can't sell it for that, buyer didn't want to buy it for that, and everybody's looking at new houses. So be careful.
And I bet that's happening.
Yes. So, and the reason that it's happening now is because people are in a frenzy and the appraisals have not caught up with the buyer's
The only
expectation.
option would be like with Sonia, you'd have to go, you got that aunt to go write you a check for 4,000.
Yeah.
We can go over if you have cash.
Right. And I sometimes say that, I go, we can go over, but here's some risk that may be involved, especially if I don't have the numbers, because there's no, you guys haven't done the market analysis part of this, have you? Okay. There's no exact science to a market analysis. You know, you're going to hit it usually on one side or the other, because this appraiser might use these 3 comps and this appraiser may use something else. So, but you shouldn't be thousands and thousands of dollars off. If you're like $10,000 off, you missed a comp somewhere. So, unless you just got a really bad appraiser, which sometimes happens. But you need to have a conversation. So we're going to bid a little bit over, and we're going to go $3,000 over the appraised price. Now, there is always a small chance that this house will not appraise for that. And let me tell you what's going to happen. Sellers can either choose to lower the price and sell at the appraised price, or they may refuse and wait for the next buyer. If that happens, do you have in your savings the ability to come out of pocket for the difference with that? If they want the house bad enough, they will. This is kind of an unusual year. I've had more people willing to pay out of pocket for the difference between the purchase price and appraised value than ever before. And that's because our market is not catching up. You know, appraisers can only use what's happened in the past. And we've got such a unique market where the inventory is so low and, you know, the pool of buyers is so large that it's eventually pushing the price up. Now, great news, in a year from now, all those higher prices will be the market value. And they're just gonna be up. So, but you have to understand the process of that.
Good for the sellers.
Great for the sellers. Fantastic for the sellers.
Fabulous.
There's always going to be a buyer's market or a seller's market, you know, and you either paid at the bottom of the market or you paid at the top of the market. And there's no right or wrong with that. You paid at the top of the market, Courtney, but you got 2.5% interest. So you could wait 2 years, and because some people say, well, I don't want to pay over asking price, but at 2.5%, if you wait until next year and the interest rate even goes up 1%, and you guys want to probably learn this script and write it down. You lose $10,000 of your buying power when the interest raises 1%. So if I'm at 2.3% and I want my house payment to be $800 a month, because that's what I can afford, and I go, I don't know if I want to pay full price for this house. That seems kind of expensive. We can wait. We absolutely can wait. But these houses are selling, and that's going to be the market value for them. You're going to wait a year, and let's say interest goes up to 2.3%. You have to buy a house that's $10,000 less just to keep that $800 payment. So does that make sense?
Yes.
You're not buying a $140,000 house. You're buying a $130,000 house, and you waited a year. So is that what you want to do?
Yeah.
So I would rather get the lower interest rate. Right.
Somebody's like, no, wait. Or,
Yeah.
you know, I'm just thinking.
Because you're going to have buyer consultations where they're like, well, I don't know. I'm deciding if I want to renew my lease or, you know, for another year, or if I want to buy now. Okay, well, let's look at what those options look like for you. You're just giving them two
Everything
choices.
is so interconnected,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Because you could go, okay, I understand you want to save on that point, I get that, you know, there's buying power. I'll tell you after, been on the block a couple of times, the price point's not going to stay where it is. Houses are going to be,
They're gonna-
drop in value.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a buyer's market someday. But
They never drop much.
they will, and they will, and especially with the economy and unemployment where they are right now, right? What we have coming in the next 2 years, I predict.
Yeah.
And so, but the house that you want to buy, those people aren't gonna sell that house for less than they paid for by 20, they're gonna hold on to the house,
Right,
right? So what you wanna buy isn't gonna be available.
right.
Things people are willing to dump for less than they paid for it. that's
Unless
gonna be-
something's logistically wrong with the house, prices typically never go down. So if they do, it's not a significant amount to make a huge difference in your payment. So, and that's been my experience in 14 years, because they're like, I don't want to pay 140 because it's high. Well, in a year from now, people that did pay 140 just set the market. That's how much the house costs now.
You've never seen the market in Norman dip down, really?
Nope,
So
not
then
in
the point
Norman.
would be, because I've been talking with. some buyers.
I've seen it not appreciate, but I've never seen it go down. Oklahoma City, yes, I've seen it go down slightly. So in some
But
areas.
nothing like Vegas, nothing.
Oh, no, they had 50% underwater, yeah.
I was gonna say, I've talked to some buyers that, you know, because of concerns with employment and stuff, even if they have a job, just fear of losing it, it's
Sure.
keeping them from, like, purchasing right now, you know, like, we're just gonna wait and see what the market does. And I always mention that about, you know, interest rates are really low,
Mhm.
and it's almost like they're like, yeah, it just like doesn't seem to, but you were saying, to add the point of, well, you know, you're gonna be looking at a price point of $10,000 less if it goes up a percentage, like, is that how you phrase that to kind of add on?
Well, I tell them, I said, let's talk about your buying power. And then I go, okay, let's talk about your future plans. George, in the next year, are you going to be homeless?
No,
You don't have any plans on being homeless.
I'm not planning on it.
Okay, so you got to live somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so your current situation right now, you're paying rent into your landlord.
Yes,
And your landlord's making his house payment based on the rent that you pay.
yeah,
So you're making a mortgage payment, it's just not yours?
right, yeah, I guess so.
Okay, so,
Oh, that's really.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about the concern of, well, but I don't have to pay for repairs, blah, 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 would you just kind of address that? Well, that is something that, you know, you have
so
to.
oftentimes buyers will spend less than $5,000 a year in repairs. And they think it's gonna be this gigantic amount.
So just put it in perspective.
Yeah, so let's talk about what's the most expensive thing that could go wrong in your house. You know, let's say your hot water tank were to go out. So now your house payment is often gonna be a little bit lower than what you're paying in rent. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, so if you're paying $700 for a house payment and you're paying $1,000 a month rent, you're really paying $300 more. So the average hot water tank is around $1,200 to replace. How many months of rent would you have to pay over before you'd be able to afford to replace your own hot water tank? So I get into that conversation with buyers and say, now let's fast forward. Let's say you rent for the next 5 years. I had closed 2 transactions doing it this year because I had two clients that both had rented for over 10 years. So let's talk about the average price of a house. And I said, every month when you make your house payment, your principal's coming down. So the amount that you owe, what do you think is happening to the value of your house? It's continually going up. I said, how much are you spending in rent? And then I literally just do a calculation in front. So you've rented for 10 years, you paid $800. So you've spent $80,000 paying somebody else's mortgage. What would that have looked like for your own house?
10 years ago, so he would have not bought a nice house.
Yeah. So, but you have $80,000 in equity. So if you're purchasing a house, you've got kind of like a little bit of forced savings. Because if you think about this, I'm going off topic, guys. Sorry. So, but if you think about making a payment on your house, as Tom said, nobody wants to sell the house for less than what they bought it for. I buy a house for $150,000. I make payments on it for 5 years. And even if we say I decided in the future to, let's say I sold it and my net was $150,000. Did I essentially just live the last 5 years rent free?
Yeah.
I did, because I paid myself back for all those payments that I made on my house. I got it all back. So if you continue to rent, let's say for the next 5 years, how much of your rent do you think your landlord's going to give you back when you give notice? So, and then you just gotta stop and let them make some calculations in their head to go,
Smarting them, like.
It's like
It's not, well, it's more about making, and like I said in the beginning, it's about when buyers and sellers showing them things that they didn't realize, like negotiating commission. They thought they wanted to save commission. They really want to net the most money.
Yes.
You can't have both. You can't have a discount realtor netting you the most money.
Yeah.
So once you kind of point that out, then they're like, So it's not really about outsmarting us, more about just making them realize certain events that need to happen. So kind of moving, I'm gonna go really fast. So in the preparing part of ask clarifying questions and set clear expectations. Just like I talked about with the buyer, you're gonna have a home inspection. It's going to come back with a million things. We're going to look for the major components, the roof, the air, the hot water tank, those things. And we're not going to be asking for everything. If you say that up front, I rarely have had anybody say, I want everything on the list. So, okay, so when do you want to go back out and look for new houses?
Right, because that's all we're doing.
So and let me tell you why I say that. If we ask the seller to repair these 35 things, you're most likely going to find that your contract has been canceled. We need to look for new houses. Is that what you would like to do? And then, so like I said, just make sure they understand what's going to happen next. Same thing with sellers. I don't want to fix everything. We'll get in off the ledge and let's figure out what it's going to cost. So yeah, and then do you really want to cancel this contract over $500 worth of repairs? Have them kind of set that.
Also, the real estate industry is very small, and you will run into people, like work with the same people over and over. And if it's like, hey, she's the one who sends the list with 100 things.
That is true. That's true. They're like, and they will know that when you send the offer, they're like, oh, she always sends a giant TR. Don't accept that one, or they'll make it so difficult. They're going to say they won't do this, and then they will do this. So be careful with your reputation in real estate. What I really want you to take away from every single time that you have to negotiate, you better be learning from that experience every single time. Pay attention to their non-verbal cues. I like to do everything in person because I can read your body language, with something like that. It's a little bit easier, but it's not always feasible. but so you need to be listening. Can you hear stress in somebody's voice sometimes?
Yeah.
Okay, if you're walking past my door and I've got something with that stupid computer, you heard that.
You see their expression when they're like,
Yes.
just really.
But you can hear like a
know
strain in somebody's
singing.
voice. When you hear that, you know, one, you've got to de-escalate things a little bit. You know, I hear, it sounds like that part of this contract is really causing a stressor. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Don't assume that you know what it is. Ask them why that's causing a problem.
You said something in class that I really liked. You said there's no such thing as a real estate emergency.
There's not.
I was like,
There's
that
not.
puts everything in perspective.
Lack of preparation, but not a real estate emergency. So again, if you learn what is important to them and why something's causing stress, that can help you negotiate the position that you want your buyer or seller to have. And remember, it has to be a win-win situation. If you're walking away and you're going, you're getting every single thing that you want, what is the seller getting out of this? So, and they'll go, well, nothing, I'm buying their house. Okay, so let's be in the seller's position.
You're not buying their
Yeah,
house.
let's get into the seller's position. So sometimes you have to make them put the other hat on. When somebody wants to make a low offer, and I said I was going to be fast, but I'm never fast. So when somebody wants to make a low offer, a lot of times I'll say, okay, perfect. Let's see what that looks like on the seller side of things. And I'll do a seller net sheet for a buyer. So why would you do that? Well, here's their price. And then here's how much they're going to pay in real estate commissions. And then here's how much they're paying for you. And they're going to walk away with X amount. If you were selling your house, would you sell for that? Sometimes the buyer's like, okay, I get it. Okay, that's $20,000 less than what they paid for it 5 years ago. They're probably not going to take that offer. Now you can renegotiate the offer before you actually make it. So feel free to do a seller net sheet for a buyer too. Okay, we're not getting through all of these. So I'm going to apologize now. I'm so slow. These used to be 3-hour classes. So, all right. Yeah, let's cut them down. All right, let's move to your success habits. Sorry. There are some scripts. Do they still have the scripts in the back for you? Okay. So, but I'm going to tell you that the best scripts to have is to role play it out with someone else. So you can practice scripts by yourself all day long, but do you guys have script practicing partners now?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm making a herd.
Yes.
You know what, as a brand new agent, I didn't know, like, what kind of objections do you come up with? I mean, I'm kind of nerdy, so take that with a grain of salt, but I would walk around and go, hey, what kind of TRR problems did you have? What kind of TRR problems did you have? And what, and find out what was the biggest point that they were butting heads on. And then I would practice role playing scripts based on that. So that way you get some real life, because there is nothing new under the sun. So you're going to have roof problems, you're going to have hot water tank problems, you're going to have foundation problems, you're going to have leaks under the sink. All of those things are going to happen. Rarely do you have something brand new come up to where you go, I've never had that happen before. So because somebody's had that happen before. So when you're doing these role-playing scripts with your partners, try to get some scenarios that existing agents have had, because that's going to help you overcome that, because it will come up with you at some point, someday, somehow. So, all right. How is it going with your 10 contacts a day? Are you finding that hard? Getting 10 contacts in? George's like, no, I'm I told George, I said, almost every new agent should practice the ISA position, because if you can get over the fear of contacting people, it's just going to become second nature. But if you're not making cold calls, and you don't have to make cold calls, you just have to figure out, where can I be that will put me into a position where I might meet somebody who needs to buy or sell in real estate. Now, will all of your contacts be leads?
No.
Nope. So
Do your business to business, find your vendors, who's your handyman,
Yep.
who's your plumber,
who's your people?
vendor,
Yeah. You just need to be adding 10 people, because those 10 people may never move, but they may know people who need to move. So it's more about the webbing contact. Don't necessarily say, well, I can't put them in my database because they didn't indicate that they're going to buy or sell soon. Okay. It may be 5 years from now, but they may have a friend that goes, oh, I just met a real estate agent this week, then I think you'll really like them. So, and they're going to recommend you. So 10 conversations a day. Are you tracking your numbers to figure out how many conversations that actually looks like?
Do you mean like how many answer?
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd say for me, it's usually like maybe 1 in 10 answer, like.
Right.
Is, I would say.
So that's gonna be a lot. If you're doing cold calls and 1 in 10 answer, that's a lot of cold calls during the day. So you could, knock on doors. That's what, and if I did open houses my whole first year because there was no COVID. So I did 2 open houses at a minimum every month, and I door knocked the houses around the open houses. So that's going to put you into contact with a lot of people. Those people may not move, but if I talk to them, they went in my database and I sent them handwritten cards saying, thanks for having a conversation with me about blah, blah, blah. And I may say something about how the open house went if they didn't come. So now those people stay in your contact. You're still sending things out as you would any other person. And they may never move. So, but your point is not to get necessarily them, but who they know. I don't know how door knocking is going to work. I don't door knock anymore. So do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. Yes.
How popular and or successful or has happened with just hosting events, especially right now as COVID's hit, there's a lot of struggling businesses and
Sure.
there's a lot of small businesses, and so partnering as a real estate agent with local businesses to host events.
I think it's going to be a little bit of a challenge just because of the social distancing
Right.
things that come up. Not impossible,
We've done one, we did a watermelon event. Hanson is obsessed with watermelon, for those of you who don't know. So we did a watermelon event and it was just a come and go. So it was we did all of our touches beforehand. Don't forget. Okay, it's the day of, come pick up your watermelon and leave.
Right, okay.
So
Yeah, and it can-
something like that. And it was outside, so. it
Right.
wasn't,
you could host events, give away pumpkins, little,
Right.
you'd be surprised what people will do for free stuff.
I'm
I mean-
really sad about social distancing because I was thinking okay, making a cookie cutter Christmas event where you decorate gingerbread men and talk about how to make your home stand up art and housing developments and
Yeah.
stuff.
Think about it. I always think of the National, the Blood Institute. You're going to get a free t-shirt that you'll probably never wear
It's
to
not
give
gonna
blood.
fit.
It's not going to fit. It's a one size fits all.
Big.
Yeah. So they're going to give you a t-shirt. You gave blood for a t-shirt that you're never going to wear. It's not about the t-shirt. It's about getting the t-shirt. So kind of think outside. I think right now you're going to have to think outside the box to have 10 conversations a day. But, don't think that they all have to come from one place either. You may be doing 5 door knocks and then 5, people at an open house or something like that. The handwritten notes make a huge difference though. So,
Do you send them to anyone? It's not like you send them to basically anyone you have contact with and have the address of.
and I have the address if I'm door knocking because
Oh,
I
right,
stood there. But even if I'm talking to for sale by owners or expireds, I always send a handwritten note because people are so used to getting junk mail that you pay attention. We're like, oh, what is this? This is an invitation to something. So I will open that. But if you're not going on the 10 previews a week, do it. You can't see things from the MLS. Oh my gosh. And I can tell you that because I've been showing $400,000 houses all week that I'm like, what happened? Because the pictures look fantastic. And then you get there and you're like, oh my gosh, this is not what it looks like. You need to know what each price range is. Like new properties that are coming on, go together in groups, Yeah, where you're just just make an appointment and say, hey, we're just previewing this house. Realtor, broker opens, go to open houses.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I'm Rob
Yeah,
MLS,
I
I'm
didn't take it on
no licensed yet, none of the.
So on
boards,
Sunday, when you have open houses and you have a Zillow app, because I know you got that on your phone.
Oh, I have all of them. As a 10-year-old, I would be
Yep.
looking at.
Then you're gonna say, hey, on Sunday, I'm gonna go see 5 open houses. And when you come in, just say, hey, I'm a real estate agent, just wanna let you know I'm previewing houses. You need to see what condition and areas money will buy.
I actually did that this weekend,
Mhm.
and I had agents asking me questions.
Oh,
I
yeah.
realized people that were doing the shows, and I engaged in their question, asked them something about construction of the house. They found out that I was a newly licensed agent.
Right.
And then they were asking me questions, just that fast about
Yep.
the property.
Yep.
Very interesting.
And it's interesting to see, like if I have, $150,000 buyer, I may go to 3 $150,000 houses and see what is the difference in a house in this area of town versus this side of town,
Right.
that money can buy. That way, when I get that client, I can tell them.
There are two houses that are interesting to look at if you want. They're next door to each other. They're in a very upscale neighborhood. They're priced at $450, and they're priced at the exact same price point. One needs a complete renovation, one's been completely done. And so it'll be interesting how they sell.
Right.
You know?
Okay. Last, we're done today. Practice your scripts. I apologize that I am slow about getting through all of these things. I'll be
This is
better.
one of those ones I think we did.
Yeah, we've
Oh,
gone
really?
way over.
I like to start and end on time, so it aggravates me that I've actually gone 10 minutes over now. So, but again, practice those role plays. And like I said, if you want to get real in your role play, find out what some real problems are that people come up with. And then it's okay to ask, hey, how did you handle that situation? So I may say, okay, well, we needed a roof replaced and the seller's insurance wouldn't cover it. How did you handle that? Then ask another real estate agent, how would you handle that? Because it'll give you a good idea of some options that you can have for someone. All right. Bye, everyone on Zoom. Sorry.
Thank you, Peggy.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just.
Bye.
Yeah, if you just want to stick your number right on.